The office was silent except for the soft hum of the air conditioning and the occasional ping from her laptop. Sarah Matthews, CEO of Horizon Innovations, hadn't planned to be here at midnight, but deadlines wait for no one, not even bosses. What she didn't expect was the gentle knock that echoed through the empty floor, or the familiar voice of James Parker, her newest employee and a single father struggling to keep it all together. When she opened her office door and saw his exhausted face, she froze as he whispered those words, "Are you alone?" What happened next would change both their lives forever. If you're moved by stories of unexpected kindness and second chances, hit that like button and subscribe to see more content that reminds us of our shared humanity. Your support helps us bring more stories like this one to light. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as Sarah rubbed her tired eyes. The quarterly reports weren't going to review themselves, and tomorrow's board meeting loomed like a storm cloud on the horizon. At 42, she had climbed every rung of the corporate ladder through sheer determination and countless nights just like this one. The corner office with its sweeping city views was her reward, that and the crushing responsibility that came with it. Her phone buzzed with a text from her mother, "Are you still at the office?" "It's nearly midnight, Sarah." She ignored it, just as she had ignored the last three. Her mother meant well, but she didn't understand what it took to stay on top in this industry. Nobody did. The soft knock almost didn't register. Sarah looked up, confused. The cleaning staff had already come and gone hours ago. Security would have called up if someone had entered the building. "Hello?" she called out, her hand instinctively moving toward the letter opener on her desk. The knock came again, slightly louder this time. Sarah stood, smoothing down her wrinkled blouse as she approached the door. Through the frosted glass, she could make out a tall figure shifting nervously from foot to foot. When she opened the door, James Parker stood before her, his usually neat appearance disheveled. His tie was loosened, dark circles prominent under his eyes. In the 3 months since she'd hired him as a project manager, she'd never seen him look so broken. "Mr. Parker?" Sarah said, professional mask firmly in place despite her surprise. "Is everything all right?" He glanced over his shoulder at the darkened office floor before turning back to her. "Are you alone?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. In any other circumstance, from any other employee, those words might have seemed threatening. But there was something in James's eyes, not danger, but desperation. "Yes," she answered cautiously. "What's this about?" James ran a hand through his already disheveled hair. "I'm sorry to bother you so late, Ms. Matthews. I saw the light under your door when I came up to get something from my desk and I just..." His voice cracked. "I didn't know where else to go." Sarah hesitated only a moment before stepping aside. "Come in, Mr. Parker." "James," he corrected automatically as he entered her office. "Please." "James," she echoed, closing the door behind him. "Sit down before you fall down." He sank into one of the chairs facing her desk, his tall frame seeming to collapse in on itself. Sarah walked to the small bar cart in the corner of her office, a gift from the board after last year's record profits, and poured 2 fingers of whiskey into a crystal tumbler. "Drink," she instructed, handing it to him. "Then talk." James accepted the glass with a grateful nod and took a small sip. The amber liquid seemed to steady him somewhat. "I'm sorry," he began again. "I know this is completely unprofessional." "We're well past office hours," Sarah replied, leaning against her desk rather than returning to her chair. The position gave her some distance while avoiding the power dynamic of her sitting behind her desk. "What's going on?" James stared into his glass. "My daughter, Emma. She's sick. Really sick." Sarah felt her professional detachment waver. She knew James was a single father. It had come up during his interview when he'd negotiated flexible hours to accommodate school pickups. His daughter was 8, if she remembered correctly. "I'm sorry to hear that. Is it serious?" James nodded, his knuckles white around the glass. Leukemia. We found out 3 weeks ago. Sarah's breath caught. 3 weeks? But you've been here every day, meeting all your deadlines. I couldn't afford not to be, he said simply. The medical bills are already piling up, and my insurance. He trailed off, taking another sip of whiskey. Why didn't you say anything? Sarah asked, genuinely perplexed. She prided herself on running a company that cared for its employees. James gave a hollow laugh. And say what? Excuse me, boss, I've only known for 3 months, my life is falling apart. I needed to prove myself. I needed this job. Sarah moved to sit in the chair beside him rather than across from him. James, what happened tonight? Why are you here? He set the glass down carefully on her desk. Emma had a bad reaction to her treatment today. They kept her for observation, but I had to come home to get her comfort items, this stuffed rabbit she's had since she was a baby, her favorite blanket. I was going to grab them and head back to the hospital, but when I got home... His voice broke again. The landlord changed the locks. There was an eviction notice on the door. Sarah felt a surge of anger on his behalf. He can't do that without proper notice. He gave notice, James admitted. I've been behind on rent since Emma's diagnosis. All my money is going to medical bills and medication copays. I thought I had more time to figure something out. So you came here to get the emergency contact information for HR, he said. I was hoping they might be able to advance me some of my salary. But then I saw your light, and I just... He looked up at her, his eyes red-rimmed but dry. I don't know what to do, Sarah. My daughter is lying in a hospital bed asking for her rabbit, and I can't even get into our apartment to get it for her. What kind of father does that make me? The raw pain in his voice struck something deep within Sarah. She had built her career on being decisive, on never showing weakness. But in that moment, she saw not an employee in crisis, but a parent fighting an impossible battle alone. A human one, she said softly. Wait here. Sarah walked back to her desk and picked up her phone. James watched as she dialed a number from memory. Marcus? It's Sarah Matthews. Yes, I know what time it is. I need a favor. She turned slightly away from James as she spoke. I have an employee with an emergency housing situation. Yes, tonight. I need your best available 2-bedroom, furnished, ready immediately. She paused, listening. Perfect. Email me the details. And Marcus? I'll remember this. She ended the call and immediately dialed another number. Detective Rodriguez? Sarah Matthews. I'm calling in that favor you owe me. I need someone to meet me at an address in 30 minutes to supervise the retrieval of personal belongings from a locked apartment. Another pause. Yes, it's important. I wouldn't call at midnight if it wasn't. James stared at her in disbelief as she made a third call, this one to her assistant's voicemail. Diane, when you get in tomorrow, I need you to contact HR about setting up an emergency salary advance for James Parker. Also, look into our health insurance policy and find out what additional coverage we can provide for dependents with serious illnesses. If there are gaps, I want proposals for how to fill them by the end of the day. Thanks. She set down her phone and turned back to James, who was looking at her as if she'd grown a second head. What just happened? He asked. I made some calls, Sarah said, already gathering her things. Marcus is a real estate developer who owes me for some zoning assistance last year. He's setting you up in a furnished apartment in one of his buildings. No rent for the first 3 months while you get back on your feet. I can't accept. You can and you will, Sarah cut him off. Detective Rodriguez is meeting us at your old apartment so we can get Emma's things and whatever else you need tonight. Tomorrow, we'll figure out the rest. James stood, his legs unsteady. "Why would you do this for me?" Sarah paused in the act of putting on her coat. It was a good question, one she wasn't entirely sure she had an answer for. She had always kept a professional distance from her employees. It was easier that way, cleaner. But something about James's quiet dignity in the face of such overwhelming circumstances had broken through her carefully constructed walls. "Because no one should have to face what you're facing alone," she said finally. "Now come on. Emma's waiting for her rabbit." The drive to James's apartment was quiet, both of them lost in their own thoughts. Sarah's sleek BMW seemed out of place in the modest neighborhood where James had lived, she corrected herself mentally. Detective Rodriguez was waiting for them, looking tired but unsurprised to see Sarah. They had history, a complicated friendship that had begun when Sarah had provided key testimony in a corporate fraud case years ago. "This the guy?" Rodriguez asked, nodding toward James. "This is James Parker," Sarah confirmed. "James, Detective Maria Rodriguez." The detective sized James up with a practiced eye before nodding. "Landlord's on his way. Says he's within his rights." "We'll see about that," Sarah muttered. The landlord, a heavy-set man named Grayson, arrived 10 minutes later, clearly unhappy about being called out in the middle of the night. "This is a legal entry," he blustered as Rodriguez explained the situation. "He's 3 months behind on rent." "And this was an illegal eviction," Rodriguez countered smoothly. "No court order, no sheriff present." "You want to talk about illegal, Mr. Grayson? We can have that conversation down at the station." The landlord's face reddened, but he produced the keys with bad grace. 20 minutes. Then I want him gone." James moved through the small apartment efficiently, gathering Emma's beloved rabbit and blanket first, then filling 2 suitcases with their most essential belongings. Sarah stood in the doorway, taking in the modest but clearly loved home. Photos of James and a small girl with his same warm brown eyes and bright smile covered one wall. School art projects were proudly displayed on the refrigerator. It was a home, not just an apartment, and Sarah felt a renewed surge of anger at the landlord waiting impatiently in the hallway. When James had packed what he could, Rodriguez helped carry the bags to Sarah's car. "Thank you," James said to the detective. "I don't know how to repay you." Rodriguez shook her head. "No need. Any friend of Sarah's." She trailed off, giving Sarah a look that clearly said they would be discussing this later. "Take care of your little girl." The apartment Marcus had arranged was in a new development downtown, just 10 minutes from the hospital. It was modern and impersonal, but clean and comfortable, with 2 bedrooms and a view of the city that rivaled the one from Sarah's office. "This is too much," James said as they set his bags down in the entryway. "It's temporary," Sarah reminded him. "Just until you get back on your feet." James turned to face her, his expression serious. "Why are you really doing this, Sarah? We barely know each other." Sarah considered deflecting the question again, but something in his steady gaze demanded honesty. "My sister had leukemia when we were kids," she said quietly. "I was 12, she was 8, Emma's age. My parents did everything they could, worked multiple jobs, sold our house, moved us into a tiny apartment. It still wasn't enough. The medical bills, the experimental treatments they wanted to try, it broke them. Not just financially, but as people. They were so focused on saving her that they forgot how to live, how to be there for each other. When she died anyway, there was nothing left of our family to hold on to." James's expression softened with understanding. "I'm so sorry." Sarah shook her head. "It was a long time ago. But I promised myself that if I ever had the power to help someone in that situation, I would. Not just with money, but with support. The kind my parents never had." "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," Sarah replied. "Just focus on Emma. The rest we'll figure out together." She glanced at her watch. Speaking of which, it's almost 2 in the morning. Shouldn't you be getting back to the hospital? James nodded, gathering up the stuffed rabbit and blanket. Yes. I should. I'll drive you, Sarah offered, already heading for the door. You've done more than enough, James protested. I can call a cab. Don't be ridiculous. The hospital is on my way home. It wasn't, not really, but James was too exhausted to argue further. The pediatric oncology ward was quiet when they arrived, the nurses at their station speaking in hushed tones. One looked up in surprise as James approached, the stuffed rabbit clutched in his hand. Mr. Parker. We were getting worried. Emma's been asking for you. I'm sorry, James said. There was a situation. Is she awake? The nurse nodded. She's been fighting sleep until you got back with Hoppy. James turned to Sarah, who had hung back near the entrance. Thank you. For everything. I don't know how I'll ever repay you. Sarah felt suddenly awkward, out of place in this world of midnight hospital vigils and stuffed rabbits named Hoppy. You don't have to. Just take care of your daughter. James hesitated, then stepped forward and hugged her briefly. I will. Good night, Sarah. She watched as he disappeared down the corridor, the rabbit dangling from his hand. Something tightened in her chest, an unfamiliar feeling she couldn't quite name. The night nurse gave her a curious look. Are you family? Sarah opened her mouth to say no, to explain that she was just James's boss, but the words that came out surprised her. Something like that. The drive home was long and quiet. By the time Sarah reached her penthouse apartment, the sky was beginning to lighten with the first hints of dawn. She should have been exhausted, but her mind was racing, replaying the events of the night. Why had she done it? Really? Yes, there was her sister, the promise she'd made to herself. But it was more than that. In James's desperate eyes, she had seen something of herself, the determination to keep going no matter what, to shoulder burdens alone rather than admit weakness. But James had broken that pattern tonight. He had asked for help when he needed it most. And somehow, that had given Sarah permission to do the same, to let down her guard, to connect with another human being in a way she hadn't in years. As she finally fell into bed, Sarah realized the feeling in her chest wasn't discomfort or awkwardness. It was purpose. For the first time in longer than she could remember, she had used her power for something more meaningful than quarterly profits or market share. She slept deeply and dreamlessly, waking only when her alarm blared at 7. The board meeting. She had completely forgotten. For a moment, she considered calling in sick, something she hadn't done in over a decade. But no, there was work to be done, and not just the kind that showed up on balance sheets. Sarah arrived at the office looking immaculate as always, giving no indication of her midnight adventure. Her assistant, Diane, greeted her with a cup of coffee and a curious expression. I got your voicemail, Diane said, following Sarah into her office. About James Parker? Is everything okay? No, Sarah replied honestly. But it will be. Did you look into the health insurance issue? Diane nodded, pulling out her tablet. Our current plan covers dependents, but there's a cap on certain treatments, including some cancer therapies. I've drafted proposals for 3 supplemental plans that would provide better coverage, not just for James's daughter but for all employees' dependents with serious illnesses. Sarah took the tablet, scanning the proposals quickly. This one, she said, pointing to the most comprehensive option. How soon can we implement it? Diane blinked in surprise. It's the most expensive option. I'm aware of the cost, Sarah said calmly. How soon? With board approval, we could have it in place by the end of the month. Sarah handed back the tablet. Draft a presentation for today's meeting. I want this to be the first item on the agenda.